Welcome to r/malicious compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. The first story. Boss asked me to come to the shift, and then threatened me. I left the shift earlier. The second story. Boss ignored my vacation notice and was forced to pay me more. The third story. Last-minute travel for emergency repairs cost $35,000. Funding department asked us to rebook to make it cheaper. Today's first story is, begged me to come in on my first day of a vacation and then threatened me with termination. As I was finishing up high school, I got my first job working at the Circle K down the street from my house. I still lived with my dad and I had a pretty sweet deal because he was a consultant. Thus, his big house with a pool in a nice neighborhood was all mine about 3 weeks out of the month, sometimes as long as 6 weeks. My dad told me I had to start paying for my own insurance for my car, and there'd be no allowance anymore, so I needed some sort of job, but I didn't need anything major, so I took the job under the premise that they just needed someone part-time. Immediately, I was thrust into 40-plus hours a week at this place, as the manager had some weird inability to hire people. I honestly think he just lied about not being able to get people so he could run a skeleton crew to make his profit margins look better. I can't count how many times they had one person working a shift that needed at least 2 and could have used 3. The place was always a bit of a mess because, as mentioned, we were chronically understaffed. He was always asking us to do a ridiculous amount of work, and at one point he even managed to peeve off the beverage distributor so they'd no longer help stock the coolers when our drink supplies came in. So sometimes you'd be in charge of stocking all the coolers, a huge order, while having to keep an eye on the register and all the other SH we had to do, like facing all the shelves, rotating the hot foods, etc. Long story short, what should have been a brainless SH job that did have SH pay, minimum wage, ended up sucking up a huge portion of my time. But life could have been worse. I had a lot of extra money and a really nice house all to myself, so there were some social perks indeed. At a certain point, I requested some time off to go on a road trip with some friends, and it was granted. The day that we're supposed to be heading out on the road, I get a call from my boss begging me to cover. He acknowledges that it's supposed to be the beginning of my vacation, but he couldn't get anyone to cover. We probably didn't actually have anyone that could that day, as we were so understaffed. Luckily for him, the driver on our road trip had let us know that we were going to be leaving later than originally thought, pretty much exactly when I'd normally be getting off SH, so I agreed thinking Mr. Bossman would owe me one. So I go in, and is there gratitude? Is there some beer with a bow on it waiting for me as a post-shift thank you? No. The dude gives me this ridiculous list of SH to do. There was always a lot of work to do there, but this was actually the most ridiculous amount he'd ever dumped on me. The icing on the cake was that he ended his whole spiel with, and I need all this done tonight or don't bother showing back up. The CWAD actually had the nerve to threaten me after I came in one day that was supposed to be the beginning of a vacation. So I waited for him to leave, enjoyed some hot dogs while reading a magazine, sold myself a ton of beer. I couldn't stoop to actually stealing, but I was under 21, so this was convenient, and then closed the place up about 2 hours early. I didn't want to leave right away because then someone might notify him, but this particular branch was dead after a certain time, and so no one would notice. Then I went on vacation, and seeing as I hadn't done anything, let alone his laundry list of crap, I never went back. Despite the fact that I didn't do what he asked, he still expected me back, so I had the pleasure of listening to his 5 or 6 irate messages before he finally realized that it wasn't a misunderstanding about when I was supposed to return to work. I was just following his instructions. The boss didn't appreciate you as an employee. I'm shocked that he has the nerve to threaten to fire you after you agreed to come on shift. Unfortunately, the boss man never thinks he owes you anything. I also think your boss just lied about not being able to hire people so he could run a skeleton crew to make his profits look better, because I don't see any other reason why more people weren't hired. I bet he had 3 or 4 ghost employees who only ever existed on paper, and all their salaries went into bank accounts that he controls. I'm sure corporate management will be glad to hear about all this, because I know it'll cost them money one way or another. You have an opportunity to get back at him for what he did to you. I would also add that if you're on vacation, leave your phone at home. As a rule, if I have a vacation scheduled, I never answer the phone from work. It always ends up being crap. If you need the phone, you can buy another phone number for the vacation period. It has saved me my weekends. The second story is, boss has no time for my time off. The company that I worked for had its work year for leave allocation between January 1st and December 31st. The industry I work in, UK construction, shuts down over the Christmas break, so you have mandatory leave taken out of your allowance. That's not a problem. I have 25 days leave to take, and the year in question was mad. I never had a chance to take any leave, and was managing to recharge on the national holidays through the year, with the odd day off here and there to pad it out. We get to August and I put a week in for September, which has been approved, but then I'm allocated to a job starting at the beginning of September. They need me to work that holiday. I'm reluctant and I warn the GM that if I don't get a chance to take some leave, that I'll be finishing that year at the start of December. GM says that's fine. So I start the project, which is programmed to go into the following year. The project is going well, but every 2 weeks I feel the management out for cover so I can take some time off. No dice. Everyone is hammered. So at the start of November, I put my holiday request in to use up my leave, and it gets approved. Bingo. After that, each week I email the project manager and GM that I'll be finishing on the 4th of December, and they need to line someone up for a handover and cover the month. Ignored. Don't care. We will look at it later. 3rd of December rolls up. I call the GM to wish him a good holiday, and I'll see him in the new year. GM starts panicking. There's no one lined up for cover and no one available to drop in. There's been no handover, so no one is up to speed on the project's nuances. Long story short, he agreed to pay overtime. Now, this firm hates the idea of paying overtime unless it is for weekend work or overnight. The manager actually wanted me to defer my leave until the next year, but the company also had a use it or lose it approach to leave. I wasn't going for that, so for that month, I was being paid for my normal day, as paid leave, and flat rate overtime for the hours worked. That's double time for a day shift for a month. It gets better because on the day before the project shuts down for the Christmas break, the GM calls me. He needs someone to do a night shift with confined space qualification. At the time in the department, that was only me, to supervise a contract carrying out a survey for 6 hours. Convo as follows. Me, what is the overtime? GM, what do you want? Me, double time and a half. GM, that's fine. Me, bugger, you agreed too quick. So the day after I worked the last day that year on the initial project at double time, I left home at 600. I get home at 1800 for a quick meal and a shower, half an hour, and I'm back out the door, 1830, arriving at this other location at 1930. Worth noting the travel hours are on the clock. This isn't commuting. Contractor sets up to do this survey. They finished at 5 o'clock the following day. I got home at 6:30 and collapsed onto my bed. To summarize that day alone, I got my 8 hours paid leave plus 12 hours OT, plus 12 hours at 2.5 times, 30 hours. In 24.5 hours, I took pay for 50 hours. It was a good month. At the time, I took about $2,000 a month home. For that month, I think I took $7.5 grand. They actually had a problem with paying the overtime, so that it did not show up as a massive breach in hours worked regulation. Edit. Money is nice, but don't be like me and work yourself so hard you have to retire early due to ill health. When I was green, I nearly worked myself to death trying to deliver a bad project. It was a wake-up call when one of the shuddering chippies told me that I looked like death at 26. You've made a lot of money this month. Congratulations to you. But your manager is completely irresponsible. He didn't check your application and created problems for himself and the company. Well, you on the other hand are lucky. They didn't want to pay a flat rate, but instead they made you delay my vacation. I was in a situation where they made me do crazy OT on holidays. Right before the holiday weekend, a storm broke out. Think of the massive problems starting on a Friday afternoon when it's Monday off. Everyone is gone, and they won't be back until Tuesday. A week later, I complained to HR that making me work way more than I should, and it's illegal, and yet they don't pay me OT. At first, they said I could leave if I didn't like it. I was mad at them and found a contract that described my working conditions. I shoved that contract in the HR department's face and told them I could sue them. They agreed to pay overtime, and I soon left the company. Sucks. I later found out that they have since changed the company rules. The last story is, you want us to recalculate the flights due to the cost being too high? Sure thing. A little bit of backstory. One of my jobs is to organize and send technicians to various locations to provide maintenance and support for the equipment that we run. We have a few hubs around the United States where technicians are based out of, but oftentimes they need to fly or drive to a location far enough away from the hub where they're entitled to travel and per diem. I have to review the requests for travel and per diem to make sure they're reasonable, such as not staying in a suite or flying first class, no rental upgrades unless needed, and so on. Once I've calculated the costs involved, I request the funding from another department and set it aside for travel so the technicians can be reimbursed once they come back. On this particular day, we had an emergency pop up where we needed to send technicians quickly out to a remote location in the figurative middle of nowhere. On top of that, most of our technicians were already scheduled to be out on other jobs. The only hub that had people available was the one in Hawaii. So the guys go ahead and talk to our contracted travel agency to arrange their flights and provide us the info for how much all that will cost. The guys already know the routine and really try to make sure we're not spending more than absolutely needed on this emergency maintenance. I double check it all and know it's going to cost us a pretty penny to send guys last minute from Hawaii to podunk nowhere. All in all, with rentals, hotels, and so on, we're looking at around $35,000 for the trip. I go ahead and process the requests and request the money from the funding guys. Without them saying okay, the trip doesn't happen. Here's the reply, on which our bosses are CC'd, paraphrased for brevity, but you get the idea that this guy's not happy we're spending so much, when usually a trip of this type costs around $5,000 with a non-emergency trip from a more local hub. I looked the requests over and saw several issues. First are the technicians sharing hotel rooms. As per insert applicable company policy reference here, these personnel are to share rooms. Secondly, do we really need 3 rental cars? Why not get 1 compact and a minivan for transportation? Lastly, the other expenses are overinflated. I understand there will be fuel costs, and depending on the airport they fly into, there could be a bridge toll, but the amount requested is absurd. Please correct these issues and resubmit. Funds are limited and we cannot afford frivolous spending. Okay, understood. We will go back and reschedule flights and consolidate hotel rooms and vehicles. This process takes a few more hours while the guys talk to the travel agency and rebook the last-minute flights. Everyone knows that flight and hotel prices skyrocket as you get closer to the dates. We cancel the 3 compact vehicles for the people arriving at separate times at an international airport that is further away from the location. Closer regional airport is now out of available flights, and have them all wait at the airport for hours until everyone arrives, and reserve 2 large SUVs to carry people and several bags of luggage and tools. This results in higher vehicle and fuel costs. We also rebook hotels so the technicians share double occupancy rooms, but the reduction in hotel cost does not begin to cover the other rebooking. We lay out in writing all the cost-cutting measures and efforts to save money, as requested in the email from the funding department. All in all, the total is now $42,000. I sent the email reply all to the funding department with a begrudging response authorizing the $42K. Bosses were a little mad about having to do the extra scheduling, but they don't have to pay for the travel, so they were happy to stick it back in the funding guy's face, since we all knew it would cost more. Did you cancel all at once before checking to see how much it would cost you if you followed what they suggested? I mean, I understand what they said. It was ridiculous because the longer you wait, the higher the cost, but as an employee of this company, wouldn't you want to help them instead of costing them more? Although on the other hand, it's their fault and their problem, but not yours. Unfortunately, the funding guy won't suffer any consequences for actually flushing $7,000 down the toilet for no reason. But okay. Something similar happened to me. Travel cannot be booked without prior approval. A week ago, I applied with all my boss's approval for a total of about $1,500. The finance guys didn't respond to me until 10 p.m. the night before the trip. I booked right away and it cost about double. Don't forget to subscribe and have a nice day.